Hello YouTube. Well, keeping on with my theme for the last few videos, or last two I think, I'm going to do an analysis on another public figure, a bit of a controversial one in Amber Heard. Now again, I'm going to do this caution at the start, in case you haven't watched my other ones, is that I'm only going to be commenting on their public persona. I'm making no comment, no investigation into what she's like as a private person. I don't know that. I'm only looking at what we know of her as a public figure, what she's famous for, and what impression that gives. And I'm going to give a general impression as to whether she's a good person or a bad person. Again, I do not know if this is what she's really like in real life. We all know, I'm sure, of people who present as wonderful people as their public persona, but then end up being horrible, and vice versa. And I can't say definitively that she's definitely a horrible person or she's definitely a good person, nor can I say that about any public figure. Unless, of course, I divulge into their private life. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to stick with what we know of her in her public profile. And what is she most famous for? Well, certainly to my knowledge, she is most famous for being sued by Johnny Depp twice, well, only once actually, technically, and losing, and being proven to be a liar. Certainly about a number of very important issues where she made false allegations. Now I can call her a liar legally, so I'm going to call her a liar for the rest of this. So it might not be a liar about everything, but that's what she's most famous for. She's most famous for being a liar about another celebrity. And that was a very famous court case against Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp being extraordinarily famous. At one stage, I think for 2 or 3 years, was the most well-paid actor in the world. Now Amber Heard, what's she also famous for? So probably the second most famous thing that she's well known for is an incident in, it was 2014, when she smuggled two of her pet dogs, little toy poodles or teacup poodles I think they were, into Australia. And while we didn't really notice her doing that, it was her big apology, along with Johnny Depp, that absolutely, I mean, that's one of the most revolting things I've ever seen. So that was before he sued her, and at the time it looked so fake, oh my goodness. It was embarrassing, it made headlines, certainly here in Australia, not for her smuggling the dogs in, but for that terrible apology. I mean, I don't care if she smuggled some dogs in, or even if she lied about it. It was the apology. And if anyone wants to watch that video, oh my goodness, it was just revolting, just so fake. And I was like, Johnny Depp, what are you doing? Who is this person? Is she, oh my goodness. So that's what she's the second most famous thing, certainly in my mind. Third most famous thing is for being in Aquaman. Now, I don't consider her to be very famous in this, but that is the only movie that she's been in that I've actually watched. Now, I haven't been deliberately avoiding her or anything like that. I watch a lot of movies, watch about 1 or 2 a week, have done for 20 years or so. She just hasn't been any movies that I've been interested in watching, whether they were good or bad. I've watched a lot of bad movies, but I don't watch every movie, and so that's the only movie she's been in. I don't consider her to be, well, I'd say she was top billing for that, as in one of the top 5 or 6, but I wouldn't call her, certainly not number one. Number one was Jason Momoa. We had Nicole Kidman, we had that guy that was in Once Were Warriors. We had a few other people that were more notable in that movie than she was, but in my mind that's what she's the next most famous for. I'm not aware of her being famous for anything else. Now, while she was a key witness when Johnny Depp sued the Sun newspaper in the United Kingdom, when they posted what he claimed to be false claims accusing him of being a wife beater of Amber Heard, that wasn't against Amber Heard, but sort of indirectly was. Some people talked about that. So that's what she's famous for. I don't consider her famous really for being an actress. I mean, you could argue that. Some people might know her for that, but look, from what I know, she wasn't really well known. Oh, she's also famous for being married to Johnny Depp for a good 2 years. They didn't even have a particularly messy divorce, really. And I suppose, look, it didn't really reach my radar, but she's probably famous for what she said about Johnny Depp, starting with a restraining order and all the other things she said about him. which, and I didn't realise it, but it did do a lot of damage to his career. So that's what we know about her. Now, let's have a look at an analysis based on that and what we know surrounding that. Well, the first thing to note is, so she did lose her court case. Now, she lost on 3 counts, but then she won on 1 count in her counterclaim. But did that prove that she was not lying about that? No. Proved that she was lying about, well, 3 things. And they were pretty significant things. And so I need to just highlight how significant they were and how hard it was for him to get a judgment in his favour. So not only, like, he could have got a judgment against him and still been telling the truth, because the law in relation to, well, that type of case was heavily on her favour. It was around 20,000 to 1 were his chances if they were equal with telling the truth. So I know some people are claiming, oh no, he was lying and he won in spite of lying. Well, legally, no. Legally nowhere near. And I think if you understood that case and the surroundings of that, that's just not possible. Well, not probable, I'll say. If you want to think possible, 20,000 to 1 is your odds of him lying and still winning. That's just so ridiculous. And I've worked that out already in a previous video, but look, seriously, he didn't lie. I mean, he might have lied about a few minor things, but he didn't lie substantially. The crux of it was against her. Now, I know that's verging on private things, but look, that was in the public eye. So I think it's okay to talk about that. Certainly I view it as being all right. They're making a movie about it on Netflix. And so I think we can say she lied about that. And look, it's not just the lying, but also the manipulation surrounding that. It's one thing to sort of lie where you say, oh, look, I think this happened, but you might be wrong. But I think what we were seeing there was something a lot more substantial than that. There were not only fabricated photos, and fabricated abuse. Well, she didn't actually fabricate the abuse, just the photos. Nobody saw any abuse. But she went to quite lengths. And I mean, I've talked about the Bot Sentinel thing, but there's been a lot of other people that have been very aggressive and very abusive in relation to that. Look, I know, and I wanted to just point out, 95% of the internet, which is essentially 95% of the world, the internet's not really separate from the rest of the world, but 95% of the world opposed her. And if you're looking at the jury being a jury of your peers, I think you could have picked almost anyone in the world and they would have found her guilty. Newspapers, however, 50-50. But the newspapers, I think, they made up their mind as to whether she was guilty or not before the trial began. And their decisions were not based on the facts. And of course, before the trial began, contrary to what some people in Amber Heard's side are saying, there was actually a lot more support for Amber Heard before the trial began. And in the UK trial, of course, there was a lot of support for her. And that wasn't live streamed. So people weren't able to see for themselves. They were just based on whatever newspapers told them to think and whatever the judgment was and all that. So having it live streamed made it fairer and made it more accurate. And I think that's the case anytime you live stream a trial. And of course, we're not prone to influences. And the majority of people that we're relying on for commentary about it are not influencers. They're not Johnny Depp fans. They're lawyers, legal experts, people who comment on these famous cases. They're the people that we've been listening to. And some in Amber Heard's camp have accused them of being Johnny Depp fans, of being trolls. And they're clearly not trolls. And I think that is part of that lying and manipulation that we saw exposed in the trial. And I think we can say that she is a liar and a manipulator. And some of the people who have lied on her behalf, including Bot Sentinel, but there's a lot more than that, both before and after the trial and during, were probably manipulated on her part. And we can also see there's a lot of examples of people who lied for her and then she still burned anyway. And we saw some of her friends or renter friends during the trial, and they then turned on her. And it seems as if, unfortunately, they weren't lying enough or weren't whatever enough. And look, again, I'm just looking at the the public persona. But look, I think we can say quite definitively, as a public persona, again, she's a liar and a manipulator. Now, how far you judge that on the good versus evil scale is a matter of opinion. I mean, do you consider somebody that lies and manipulates, ruins people's careers and goes after people, hounds them, and just tries to pervert truth, do you consider that person to be the worst person in history, or not quite as bad as somebody that actually kills someone else? I mean, how far along the scale do you have? As far as I know, she's never killed anybody. She's hurt people physically and emotionally and financially. But, I mean, that's what we can say from the legal aspect, although, they haven't actually proven that in law. They've only just said, well, what she says when she's saying that didn't happen is not true. So, yeah, but I think we can reasonably assess that she probably did do those things. Now, that's not murder. That's not serious physical assault, although some of the cases it is. Well, reasonably serious. But look, how far along that scale do you go is the only thing that's really in doubt, and whether, of course, her real person is the same as that public persona. But I'd certainly put her high on the list of very bad. In fact, I'd put her in by top 5 worst celebrities by public persona. I'd probably put her currently number 2 behind Taylor Swift. And again, that's public personas. Might not be what she's really like, but yeah, I wouldn't want to meet her. I think that would be terrifying. I wouldn't want to talk to her on the internet. She's quite terrifying, I think. And I think, yeah, that public persona, I mean, I'm hoping that's just an act, but doesn't look like it, does it? Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye.